It's going to be too chill over here to avoid any kind of distraction. No? That's it. Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Is it good for the stage?
Yes, it is good for the chairs. Yes, you can check it.
Okay. Thanks.
the right person for you, the assistant for Arabic. Well, for those who are searching the dialect, the Arabic dialect, so to read we have Lizelle and Ryan. 3 per week. Marrakesh.
Maybe I go back to back. Sorry. Csak, ránézni.
Okay.
maybe. Yeah? Oh, you have not got that also.
They already, I mean, everything is now on the page, but they need to know this is next and the state authorization, yes.
That please write a letter directly to them, like a Japanese writer, and then anybody send it to us, and then we will.
So not Global, not sustainable.
It's gone. Not me.
I'm going to meet the deputy on 8th of December. I will something. She is coming to raise all the draft regulations. I will raise it.
But I'm going to send them a letter.
Please do that.
If that
Do you
is,
need anyone for
I will share with you my initial thoughts.
or I can send also like a small whatever comes up. Please come up with the offer because it's Turkish definitely, like you know about the title.
It's their call.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
Maybe you have this in
I will send you like a one paragraph.
Yeah. And then I will prepare something and then I will share with you also the information.
I also share
If they take it, okay. Definitely I was not there, but he explained that I'm not going to engage him. But he told something very strange. That he's traveling to Pakistan now, the invitation of some religious stuff. I said, come on. He again said the same thing, that it's private money that we have collected through charity, we have collected so much, we are looking space in the country is only 20, that will be soon exhausted, so we need to move. When we ask them that we have local government.
Before we say a word for Hungarian translation, channel 1 in your devices. Okay, good afternoon. Allow me at the beginning to thank you all for joining us today. I warmly welcome the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Ms. Dora Dora, representatives of political parties and civil society, the Dean of Arab and African Ambassadors in Hungary, the President of the OIC Ambassadors Group, fellow ambassadors and colleagues, diplomats, founding members of the Palestinian-Hungarian Friendship Association, which was announced last week, young Hungarian Palestinian Solidarity Group, which is in the making, President of the Community of Peace, who helped in the first and only demonstration for Palestine, presidents and members of the Arab and Palestinian communities in Hungary, Hungarians, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ahlan wa sahlan. A special word of thanks goes to Her Excellency the Ambassador of Turkey, and through her, to Yunus Emre Institute, for once again hosting us here in this beautiful venue. I also would like to thank Pastor Andrássy for the great efforts you did to make the trip of our delegation successful. And finally, I would like to thank my team and volunteers for their dedication and professional service, despite some mistakes here and there, but thank you so much. Today, I'm not going to do the talking, only opening and closing. Our distinguished guests who came from different places will share their unique insights and stories. We will begin with Reverend Mitri Rahib, followed by an intervention through Zoom by Ambassador Amir Hananiya. Then we will have a short 10 minutes break, so please stay tight and close, because immediately we'll hear a testimony from Mother Agapia, and after that we will have an informative session, a speech by Pastor Monder Ishaq. We will conclude by two important announcements, so please stay until you hear the announcements, and then we will go for the Q&A session. So please help me welcome Reverend Mitri Rahib. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your hospitality, and it's great to be again here in Budapest and to see all of you. Thank you for coming for this important event. I hope that those in the back will be able to see the PowerPoint. I thought it would be good for you to have some visuals. As the president of a university that focuses on arts, culture, and design, I thought you would enjoy to have some of the Palestinian art as well. And I hope I can deal with that. So, maybe not. I don't think I need to reiterate that, but Christians are indigenous in Palestine. Because often when visitors come to visit us, they tell us, when did you convert to Christianity? Assuming that maybe we used to be heathens who converted maybe by some missionaries from the US or from Europe. But remember, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the Bible originated from Palestine, and the church was born in Jerusalem, in Palestine. Not everything you can is here on the, unfortunately. But the Christians are Arabs and Palestinians, which is again important because many people in Europe, when they hear the word Arab, they think it equals Muslim. But Arab Christianity actually is older than Islam even. And so as Christians, we are Arabs and Palestinians. Let me start maybe with a quick historical review, just to give you some information. When General Allenby entered Jerusalem in 1917, if we look at the statistics, Muslims made around 80% of the population of Palestine. Christians around 11%, Jews around 7%, and others around 2%. And Christianity actually at that time was flourishing. Believe it or not, 62% of all schools in Palestine at that time were run by churches. that shows actually the importance of Christianity in Palestine. So this was 1917. The same year, we know all the Balfour Declaration. He ignored the 91% of the population. He ignored the 80% Muslims, and he ignored the 11% Christians. He called them like the others. They are non-Jews, though the Jews were only 7% of the population. And in his speech in Parliament, 1922, 5 years later, he stated that this declaration had not only political calcul, but also religious reasons. This is what we call Christian Zionism, and I'm sure my colleague will talk a bit more about that later. So we can see how actually Western political interest and some religious understanding of the Bible actually is at the heart of our problem until today. So, and under British mandate, unfortunately, the British, they facilitated the settler colonization of Palestinian land. They paved the way for the Jews to take over the land, and also they allowed the militarization of military Jewish terrorist groups. The Palestinian Christians in the 30s, especially, were very active, even at the UN, telling the world that actually this will lead to catastrophe, that one should stop that. But like Pastor Saeed Aboud that you see here, unfortunately, this was not heard. In the Nakba, 1948, Israel took over 77% of historic Palestine. But what many people also don't, and 800,000 Palestinians were displaced, but also what many people don't know is the effect of this catastrophe, the Nakba, on the Christian community. If we look at the statistics, you can see that all major thriving cities in Palestine lost actually the majority of its Christians. So Haifa, for example, which was the second most important economic hub in Palestine, look, the population of Christians dropped actually from 13,000 to 6,000. So 15% of the Christians were displaced. If we look at Jaffa, it's even worse. From 9,000, only 2,000 left. The same as Ramle, around Lydda, actually only one-fifth stayed. So you can see actually we lost in 1948 as Christians the most influential Palestinian Christian community. So the establishment of the State of Israel, that was actually in the West celebrated, was a catastrophe for the Palestinian Christian community as well. And if you look at this chart, you can see how actually the Christian community was, the numbers were growing. So it was really a thriving community. And then you see the cut, 1948. If you see here the numbers, in 1944, the numbers of Christians were 135,000. They dropped in 1949 to 34,000. So that is the effect of the Nakba on the Christian community. Now, the church and the world answered with humanitarian aid. Unfortunately, until today, it's the same story. The world looks at Gaza, and all what they can do is to offer some humanitarian food or whatever. which doesn't really lead to a solution. Here we did a projection. What if there was no Nakba? How many Christians would there be today in Palestine? And actually, here you can see it. It will be around 600,000 Christians would be, Palestinian Christians would be living in Palestine today. Today we have less than 140,000 Palestinian Christians in both Israel and the West Bank. Now in 1967, when Israel took over the West Bank, Gaza, Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, we can see the next change, but you can see the same thing. Actually, the US basically took over from Britain. And 1967 was important actually for Christian Zionism, because especially in the US, because the conservative Christians in the US thought that the US lost the war in Vietnam because America is not anymore a Christian nation, while Israel won the war because they are a good Jewish nation. And so they became supporting Israel the same way that Britain actually was supporting. If you look at the map, you can see Palestine is disappearing slowly but surely. Just again, Israel occupies the land, but also the resources, water, oil, minerals, stone, even electromagnetic fields, and the most important thing, they occupy the narrative, which means for many people in the West, they believe that, they think that the biblical Israel is somehow connected to the state of Israel, which they are not. That's our problem. And this leads to what we call weaponizing the Bible, using the Bible as a weapon against not only Palestinian, but even against the Palestinian Christians. Like here you can see Danny Danon raising the Bible and saying, we don't care what the international community says, international law says, because the Bible gives us the right to the land. That's the weaponization. Quickly, the last part, the current situation. Today, only less than 1% of the population in Palestine are Christians. We are talking about around 120,000 inside Israel and about 45,000 in the West Bank. In Gaza today, there are less than 500 Christians left. And my colleague will talk about that shortly. Since 1967, 1 million Palestinians were in Israeli prisons. We are a nation in the West Bank and Gaza, 5 million. Imagine if 1 million were in prison, which means every fifth person was if you want to understand what's happening in the West Bank over the last, since 1967, it's the Swiss cheese, you know, the Swiss cheese, Emmentaler cheese. Basically, Israel gets the cheese, that is the land and resources, and the Palestinians are pushed in the holes without anything. If we look at Bethlehem, just one example, this is where half of the Palestinian Christian community lives. This is the boundary of Bethlehem, 1967. Israel first annexed the northern part of Bethlehem, so we lost that. And then they built 19 settlements on Palestinian land, and if you look where they are built, in the most fertile land in Bethlehem. This is Area C, which is either military zone or under Jewish settler control. As if this was not enough, this is military zone, so we are not allowed even to be there. And then Israel put the wall. You can see the wall here, from three sides actually surrounding Bethlehem. Basically, if you look at this, only 14% of the land of Bethlehem is under Palestinian control. 86% is either under Israeli military control or Jewish settler control, which means we are like, this is the, again, if you think of the cheese, Bethlehem basically today is that little town surrounded by walls and 57 checkpoints around the city. So we cannot go anywhere without going through Israeli the wall that surrounds Bethlehem from three sides that you can see here. But still, Christians continue, though we are less than 1%, we continue to play a major role here. In a study we did 5 years ago, and you can find at the website of our university, we found out that church-related organizations run 1/3 of the health services in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Imagine. 45% of the NGOs are either funded or were started by Christians. Church-related organizations constitute the third largest employer in Palestine. The largest is the government, the second largest is UNRWA, the third largest are the churches. And they are engaged in local government and in politics. Here you can see just the numbers, how many they employ, and here the sectors they are working. So what do Palestinian Christians face today? And my colleague will say more about that. So no Palestinian state, so no equal citizenship, the de facto annexation, apartheid, increasing settler terrorism on daily basis, the dire economic situation, shrinking space for advocacy, passivity and complicity of the Western world, and my colleague will talk more about that, and the right of religious national right and populism in politics worldwide. All of these are actually having direct effect on us as Palestinian Christians. If we look back, actually at the last 100 years, we can say that that Western countries were never really interested in Palestinians or in Palestinian Christians, but sought a pretext to promote their imperial interest. Over and over again, Palestinian Christians were sacrificed on the altar of Western national interests. This is unfortunately, you hear a lot, especially I think here, about persecuted Christians, as if Christians are persecuted from Muslims. But this is, I think, is a Western look at the thing. Western countries actually harmed the Christians in Palestine more than anyone else. And you can read more about that in my book, The Politics of Persecution. And still, Christians continue actually to demand justice and freedom, not humanitarian aid, but who listens to us before it's too late. We are afraid that Christianity actually will not be able in Palestine to survive the next 2 decades. And I think my colleague now, Amira, will be able to talk about that. These are the studies we did on Palestinian Christians. They are all on Amazon. If you are interested to hear more, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much for your understanding.
So our colleague, Ambassador Amir Hananiya, who is representing the higher committee of churches of Palestine, was supposed to be with us today, but for some technical issues she was unable to, so she will be joining us through Zoom meeting in a second. Ambassador?
So, hello everybody. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm hearing my voice, so I have to shut it here. So, I'm sorry that I've been contacting you through Zoom, but unfortunately for unexpected conditions, I'm joining you all through Zoom. After Reverend Mitri, it's hard to speak, but I will be trying my best. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, it is an honor to stand before you today, not simply to speak, but to be a witness, to carry the voice of people whose suffering has been silenced, distorted, and dismissed for too long. Today I speak to you about the Palestinian people, and in particular the fate of Palestinian Christians, an ancient community rooted in this land long before any modern borders or political constructs existed. Palestinian Christians are the descendants of the first believers. Let me share the presentation. I can't hear you guys, but I hope you can hear me. Palestinian Christians are the descendants of the first believers, the custodians of the earliest churches, the living community of the land where Christ walked, preached, healed, and sacrificed. Yet that land, the land of Christ, today cries out in pain. We meet here not simply to analyze political crises, but to explore what our faith traditions demand of us in times of injustice. We need to affirm the sanctity of human life, the dignity of every community, and the spiritual responsibility to speak truth in moments when silence becomes complicity. For more than 77 years, Palestinians have endured sequences of ethnic cleansing, displacement, and systematic violence. Entire communities have been uprooted, entire cities have been shattered, entire generations have been grown up knowing nothing but occupation. The world has watched and too often looked away as Palestinians have faced policies that leading human rights organizations, international legal experts, and UN bodies have described as apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and grave violations of international law. Let us be clear, the international community has the power to stop this suffering. It simply lacks the will. Gaza catastrophe of historic scale. Before we speak about Palestinian Christians especially, we must acknowledge the reality facing all Palestinians, Muslims and Christians alike. Our pain is shared, our suffering is one. In Gaza, the scale of destruction is nearly beyond comprehension. When we speak of Gaza today, we are not speaking of in generalities. We are speaking of human catastrophe, measured not only in statistics, but in the collapse of an entire society. According to joint assessment by the World Health Organization and the Palestinian Ministry of Health, as the genocide in Gaza reached an unstable path, between 16,000 and more than 100,000 civilians have been killed, with an additional 30,000 missing beneath the destroyed neighborhoods. Other scientific estimates place the numbers even higher. 115,000 deaths from direct violence and over 460,000 total deaths when accounting for both direct and indirect causes. To put into perspective, every single day of this assault has meant the killing of an average of 90 civilians, including 30 children. Nearly 2% of Gaza's child population has been wiped out, according to Yunus. This is not a tragedy, it is a systematic destruction of a generation. But numbers tell only part of the story. Israel has become a primary cause of death in Gaza through direct bombardment, through a long-term strategy that dismantles the very foundation of life. 436,000 homes destroyed. That means 92% of all housing in Gaza. 2.1 million people displaced. 95% of the population with nowhere to return. 518 schools damaged or destroyed, erasing the educational system. 654 recorded attacks on healthcare facilities, leaving hospitals unable to function. Over 1,700 health workers were killed, a blow from which any health system would collapse. The environmental destruction is equally catastrophic. More than 97% of tree crops, 95% of shrubland, and 82% of annual crops have been destroyed too, leaving the land itself wounded and unable to sustain life. Heavy metals, explosive reduces, and contaminants have saturated Gaza soil and water, threatening long-term public health and making recovery extraordinarily difficult. This is, again, not a natural disaster. It is the result of deliberate, systematic state policies, a coordinated plan to make Gaza uninhabitable. Across Gaza today, families are trapped in an unending cycle of displacement. Children face hunger, contaminated water, and the collapse of essential health services. Diseases, once eradicated, have returned. Meanwhile, the Strip has become one of the most heavily contaminated areas in the world. Unexploded ordnance is projected to take 20 to 30 years to clear. Millions of Palestinians lack of access to safe water and sanitation. Child malnutrition has surpassed 30% among children under 2, a direct result of agricultural collapse and the weaponization of starvation. 5 of Gaza's 6 waste management facilities have been destroyed, leaving 1,200 tons of garbage accumulating daily, contaminating air and living spaces. This devastation is not temporary, it is structural, it is intentional. The scale of explosive use defies comprehension. 70,000 tons, 6 times the destructive power of the Hiroshima bomb, have been dropped on one of the most densely populated places on Earth. UN estimates place the post-physical destruction is at over $70 billion, a figure that does not even begin to account for the social, ecological, and generational harm inflicted. What we are witnessing is not only immediate loss, but is protracted structural violence designed to shape life and live in Gaza for decades to come. Now the West Bank. And while the world focuses on Gaza or sometimes ignores it, the West Bank experiences the most violent wave of settlers and military attacks in recent memory. Armed settler groups, directly supported by Israeli military, storm Palestinian villages, burn homes and agricultural land, attack families, and push communities off their land. This is not random violence. This is a strategy, a state-backed effort to seize as much Palestinian land as possible, with as few Palestinians on it as possible. Communities have been depopulated. Olive groves, the source of income of thousands of families, have been destroyed. Military raids have intensified. Thousands have been arrested, many without charge or trial. Children have been killed at alarming rates. Land confiscation and drug inflation over 1,000 military checkpoints and barriers have fragmented Palestinian life and stripped communities of dignity and security. This is the largest wave of displacement in the West Bank since 1967, and the war remains silent. Now, let's talk about Palestinian Christians. Palestinian Christians are not observers in this tragedy. We are part of it. We are not a minority that stands apart. We are fully Palestinian, woven into every part of land's history and strength. Before the 1948, Christians made up 12.5% of the population of historic Palestine, same as what Reverend mentioned. Today, we are just 1.2% of historic Palestine and less than 1% within the territories that Israel occupied in 1967. We mean West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, which we call the state of Palestine nowadays. Not because our faith changed, not because our identity shifted, but because these promises made life for Christians, like all Palestinians, nearly impossible. This dramatic decline is not an accident. It is the result of land confiscation, restrictions on working, tax on churches, clergy and cemeteries, home demolitions, forced displacement, economic strangulation, and of course the isolation of Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and the steady suffocation of Palestinian life. You can see on the tables beside that His Excellency Ambassador Fatty we put some documented violations just only through the genocidal war in Gaza for the past 2 years. Please feel free to take your copy, and you will see how much is the other violations against churches and Christians in Palestine just in the previous 2 years. Besides the historic crimes against Palestinian Christians that Reverend Mitri mentioned some of them, we can give an example for Tikrit and Kufr Birham villages and Ejboon. Those catastrophes happened in 1948, but today Palestinian Christians are under attack again. In recent years, and especially during the war in Gaza, Christian institutions have been targeted repeatedly. Al-Ahli Hospital, one of Gaza's oldest Christian medical institutions, was bombed while sheltering civilians. St. Porphyrios Church, one of the oldest churches in the world, was struck killing families seeking refuge. The Holy Family Church was also attacked, resulting in the killing of Palestinian Christian civilians, also seeking shelter at the church premises. Schools, social centers, cultural institutions, and religious homes have been damaged or destroyed. Gaza Christian community, once numbering around 7,000 in 2007, has endured a dramatic and painful decline under years of siege and displacement. By 2023, fewer than 1,000 Christians remained, and with the unfolding genocide, only about nowadays 575 individuals have been left in Gaza, most sheltering in churches and church compounds. At least 44 Palestinian Christians have been killed, whether through direct Israeli strikes or through the consequences of starvation, lack of medicine, and the collapse of Gaza's healthcare system. In this land, communities face increasing pressure through settlements expansion, land confiscation, and attacks by extremist groups. Church properties are threatened, cemeteries are vandalized, clergy are harassed, worshippers restricted, the holy site discredited. In Christian village of Al-Taiba, which has been recently attacked, you can see the pictures, extremely settlers launched violent attacks, burning vehicles, vandalizing church cemeteries, and terrorizing residents. Christians in Jerusalem face forced displacement through religious laws, such as the absentee property law, which allows Jews, and only Jews, to reclaim properties from before 1948, while denying Palestinians that same right, which includes Christians. Authorities have frozen the bank accounts of the patriarchate, imposing illegal taxes on church property. An attempt to confiscate Armenian church lands is part of a calculated campaign to weaken the Christian presence. Of course, you will find more detail in the papers that are available in the book. Access to the holy sites, especially during Easter, is heavily restricted. Worshippers are beaten, blocked, or limited under extreme security. The triangulation of Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. Bethlehem, once a vibrant Christian center, as the Reverend said, is today surrounded by walls, settlements, and checkpoints. Surrounded by over 150 military checkpoints, Bethlehem has become a walled enclave. Its land has been reduced from 37 kilometers to only 7.3. Tourism and lifeline of its economy has collapsed. Families cannot reach Jerusalem. Worshippers cannot access the Holy Sepulchre or the Via Dolorosa without military permission. Before the genocide, Bethlehem welcomed over 221. Just a second. Okay. Sorry. So we lost the PowerPoint, but it's okay. Before the genocide, Bethlehem welcomed over 221,000 hotel guests in early 2023. By 2024, the number had plummeted to just over 6,000. In Bethlehem alone, we lost 147 Christian families have left in the past 2 years as a direct result of ongoing Israeli violations and pressures, further shrinking the indigenous Christian presence in the lives of Jesus Christ. The spiritual heart of Christianity is being suffocated. Last thing, imposing the lights. And yet, despite all this, Israeli officials, including war criminal and ICC fugitive Netanyahu himself, during his new and General Assembly address, spreading public religious lies and false truths about Palestinian Christians, calling for the war and claiming that Palestinian Christians are thriving, that their freedom are reserved. These are not misunderstandings. These are not misstatements. These are deliberate lies intent to confuse, deceive, and whitewash the reality of a system built on domination and displacement. The truth is clear. Israel's policies have driven Christians out of the land. Israel restricts Christians' worship in Jerusalem. Israel demolishes Christian homes and institutions. Israel attacks clergy and poverty. He will be responsible for the collapse of Christian communities in Gaza and including Jerusalem. This is the reality, wanted not by emotions, but by every major human rights organization in the world, including the UN. Why this matters? The Holy Land is not simply geography. It is the sacred foundation of faith of Christians around the world. To erase people is to erase its story. To silence its Christians is to sever Christianity from its roots. And yet, we remain resilient. Bethlehem, as a symbol of hope in the dark of time, this year, after 2 dark and painful years, Bethlehem will light its Christmas tree once again. This is more than a seasonal celebration. It is a message of hope and love, of the birthplace of Jesus Christ, a declaration that our spirit cannot be extinguished. A reminder that even in times of genocide, faith endures. From Bethlehem, the heart of Christian heritage, we send a message not only for Palestinians, but to the entire world. Let the light of truth overcome the darkness of oppression. Let the message of peace overcome the logic of war. Let the humanity of all people recognized and protected. We hope this symbolic light becomes a beacon of for justice, freedom, and future rooted in equality. And I extend heartfelt invitation to each one of you to visit Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and the Holy Land. Witness our reality, meet our people, see our living faith. Your presence matters. And you can do, meanwhile that, you can go tomorrow to watch the Via Dolorosa documentary that will be directed. It will be premiere for screening. Well, we thank here Andrássy, our dear friend. It will be tomorrow, so I invite you also to go and hear, listen to what clergy of Palestine, Christians of Palestine will tell you their stories for the daily basis. Today I ask you not to only listen, not only to sympathize, but to act. We have faced policies of separation, passion, disposition that the world would never accept anywhere else. Justice requires an end to Israeli occupation, an end to settlement expansion, an end to the blockade of Gaza, protection for churches, mosques, and the holy sites, accountability for violations of international law, and above all, recognition of Palestinian rights, full, equal, and unconditional. Christian, Muslim, secular, we are one people. Our freedom is one. Our dignity is one. We ask you to stand with us, to speak out, to challenge misinformation, to pressure governments, to defend international law when others ignore it, to insist that Palestinians' lives and Palestinian Christian lives are not expandable, not negotiable, and not negotiable. In this context, the voice of Palestinian Christians remains essential, not as a minority to be prohibited, but as a community bearing witness from one of the most sacred landscapes on earth. Thank you.
I know that she's not here with us, but thank you, Ambassador Amira. It's pretty hard not to speak in front of such amazing audience, but we'll keep going. I think in order to keep the flow running, I will keep the break after we hear Pastor Wonder. So let's now hear the testimony from Mother Agape. Please welcome Mother Agape.
Thank you, Your Excellency, distinguished guests. the members of the Turkish Cultural Center. After you've heard this report and the testimonies of Father Mitri and the ambassador, Amira, you can understand why I come to you today in pain and sorrow. It's curious how smaller incidents can cause more grief and be more visceral than great tragedies. For 2 years, we witnessed the horrors unleashed in Gaza following the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israeli military installations and regrettably on civilians. Retaliation has led to the near total destruction of Gaza. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians killed or grievously wounded, the utter ruin of its civil society, its schools, universities, hospitals, mosques, and churches destroyed or severely damaged. Thousands left homeless after the wanton destruction of their apartment and dwellings. So now we talk about a ceasefire that indeed has slowed the killing of the innocent and relieved some of the suffering, but it hasn't gone nearly far enough. In particular, it has nothing to give to the root cause of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, a conflict that has been a festering wound on the world's conscience, leading one us to ask, and I will continue to ask, for how long are we going to continue to avoid the path to a resolution of this conflict? Pacifying ourselves with statements like, yes, we support a two-state solution, or we recognize the state of Palestine, when in reality, we do nothing concrete to achieve these goals. My boldness to utter these words come from my life as a witness to what has transpired in Jerusalem and the West Bank since I first went there as a nun in May of 1996 and entered the convent of St. Mary Magdalene located on the Mount of Olives. In fact, when you came in today, you would have seen the cupolas of my home convent. From my monastic cell, I could look out to the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, constructed by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent in the 1500s. Directly below me were the whitewashed tombs of faithful Jews who considered this spot to be the most significant place to be buried, as it stands before the remaining remnants of the last Jewish temple, the Wailing Wall. Next to the wall stands the Al-Aqsa Mosque, third holiest site in the Islamic faith, and the gleaming dome of the rock, constructed above the site where all the Abrahamic faiths say that their shared father Abraham, at God's command, was willing to sacrifice his son. Welcome to one of the most intense places of the world. Yet when I first went to the convent, nestled in my monastic cell, I never knew such peace. My life revolved around daily services in church, simple obediences, and the remainder of the day and night in quiet prayer in my cell. I rarely went outside the gates of the convent. I didn't know old city, new city, Israel, Palestine. It meant nothing to me. Yet today, without a GPS, I can easily navigate all the streets of Israel and the occupied territories. That's because in 1998, in September, I was assigned to administer a girls' school of Bethany, located barely 2 miles east of us over the Mount of Olives, in the town now known by the Arabic name of Al-Azadiya, because that's where you'll find the tomb of Lazarus, who lived here with his sisters Martha and Mary. In those first 2 years, life was pretty routine, and I just worked as the administrator of the school, taking care of 350 girls from the ages of 4 to 17, mostly coming from the surrounding Palestinian towns of Al-Azadiya, Abu Dis, and Isawiya. When the school was established in the late 1930s, the towns were relatively small in population and predominantly Christian. Demographics changed in 1967, when many were forced out of the old city of Jerusalem. So by the time I got there in the late 1990s, Al-Azadiya was a predominantly Muslim town, and most of the Christian students were boarders that the nuns cared for. Young Palestinians from Bethlehem, Bejala, Taiba, and Sabati in the northern West Bank, as well as some Russian girls from the state of Israel proper, Nahadia, Haifa, Tiberias. Their families had emigrated from Russia under the law of return, since they had at least one Jewish grandparent allowing them the right to move to Israel. The main point I want to make about that time at the school is how I recognize the relationship between Muslims and Christians, a narrative that has been greatly distorted in the West. All too often we're fed the false narrative that the present conflict is a religious one, Muslim versus Jew. Hamas is out to get us all. In my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. Crosses and icons are in each classroom. Teachers were about half Muslim and half Christian. But that's a pattern played out in schools throughout the West Bank and Israel, indeed throughout the Middle East. As our colleagues have said before, the Christian institution, hospitals, schools, nursing homes serve the needs of many in the West Bank, both Muslim and Christian. To this day, some of my warmest memories or connections are with Muslim teachers who I heard back in the early 2000s, rejoiced at their wedding or the birth of their first child. And now 20 years later, when I see them, I rejoice in the birth of their first grandchild, or celebrate with them as they relate with pride the news that their high school son has now graduated from Taojihi with high marks. So my first years at the school were times of relative peace. And at that time, 98 to 2000, there was even the sense of peace in Israel and Palestine. Palestinians worked on the Israeli side in connection with Israelis. Israelis went to Jericho and other Palestinian towns, and there was hope with the Oslo Accords that peaceful times were just around the corner. Yet a hint that all was not going well became clear to me in the May of 2000, when the Israeli government did not agree to redesignate the towns of our school, Abu Dis al-Azadiya and Isawiyah, as Area A, granting them greater autonomy than they had as Area B towns. If they had been upgraded, that meant they'd have a full-fledged police force, fire department, expanded Palestinian governance, rather than relying on Israel for the security and civic needs. I, like the Palestinians, now understood that the Oslo Accords were not a path to self-determination and statehood, but a charade meant to keep the Palestinians under the control of Israel. If a fire started near our school, good luck. Local men with buckets would desperately try to extinguish the flames, while the fire trucks over the wall in East Jerusalem and to the east in Mali Adumim would not come to our aid. Settlements like Mali Adumim and later Kefra Adumim and Mitzpeh Jericho continued their aggressive expansion, overtaking Palestinian land as they grew from trailers on a hilltop to full-fledged cities with the added infrastructure of new roads, water lines, electricity, available only to Israeli citizens, not to the Palestinians abiding right next to them. Ariel Sharon's ascent to the Temple Mount in September 2000 lit the match, and the Second Intifada rose, an uprising spurred by the injustices and frustrations Palestinians felt as the Oslo Accords were not abided by, illegal Israeli settlements continued to be built on Palestinian land, and the sporadic violence against Israeli citizens born of this frustration caused fear and dashed the hopes for peace between the two sides. Right now I want us to consider, how do we determine what makes one a terrorist versus a freedom fighter? When does an uprising, an intifada, become the work of a terrorist group? What I was witnessing in Azariah caused me to reflect and to recall the example of my parents. My father was a Greek Orthodox priest. He served his flock, but he was also a member of the National Council of Churches. So he worked on issues such as busing to address racial inequality in the United States. He met with Reverend Desmond Tutu in his work fighting apartheid in South Africa. My mother graduated with a degree of journalism from University of Minnesota in 1955, went on to New York City and worked. Her first job was Radio Free Europe. Her first assignment was raising funds and writing of the uprising in Budapest, Hungary, when Hungarians risked their lives to resist the occupation of their land by a foreign power. I reflect on my roots as a proud Greek American. Every March 25th, we celebrate not only a religious holiday of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, but mark Greek Independence Day, the day in 1821 when Greeks began their uprising against the occupation of their lands. So it's very clear to me what is happening in Israel and Palestine is not rooted in a religious conflict, but is simply a land grab. You know, I have a brother who worked with President Clinton, and in the campaign, one of the strategists, James Carville, came up with a slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." And I would say the Israeli-Palestine issue, it's the occupation, stupid. What has changed since I moved to Jerusalem in 1996? In the year 2002, I wrote these words to my mother. It's over to her as a report which she sent out to people. 2002, 23 years ago. It's over 2 years now since the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians took a violent turn, and sadly no end to the troubles are in sight. The conflict has taken a great toll on both sides. As of December 2002, in a land smaller than the state of New Jersey, nearly 2,000 Palestinians have been killed and over 19,000 injured. During the same period, about 700 Israelis have been killed and nearly 5,000 injured. Many Israelis are suffering from psychological trauma due to the strain of seemingly random suicide bomb attacks and the Israeli economy is ailing with over 10% unemployment and a steep devaluation of the shekel. The 120 Israeli checkpoints scattered throughout the Palestinian areas have divided the West Bank into 300 separate clusters and the Gaza Strip into 3 separate clusters. These checkpoints, coupled with the Israeli military imposition of curfews and closures on Palestinian towns, have created a nightmare, touching every facet of Palestinian life. And now, in November 25, over 20 years later, what has changed? A dramatic increase in the death of civilians, increased and increasingly violent settler attacks. On the Israeli side, a lack of cohesion in Israeli society, an increase in mental health crises as they deal with the immoral acts of their soldiers and the increasing burden of the occupation on their psyche. There was 120 Israeli checkpoints around the West Bank. Today, Bethlehem itself is surrounded by more than 150 checkpoints, gates and barriers. As Emre said, the land area of just Bethlehem has shrunk from 37 square kilometers to just 7.3. I witnessed all this again myself. I do go back every year, but I was just there this past September and saw the now nearly over 1,000 checkpoints within the checkpoint, the color-coded barriers, and the great difficulties that the checkpoints put on the Palestinian population. And more so, and more critical as a nun to me, has been, when I first went to Palestine in 1998, like I said, there was a move towards peace. Yitzhak Rabin had just been killed by an Israeli settler, an Israeli Jewish zealot. A follower of his was someone like the current minister, Ben-Gvir. And those people were sort of like on the outskirts of Israeli society at that time. They are now the government and have the full force in Israeli society. So 20 years ago, if I had stopped at a checkpoint, I was stopped because I was in a Palestinian territory. It didn't matter whether I was Muslim or Christian. This time when I went back, no, I'll take that back, even a year ago in September, I was traveling with a priest who was from Jordan, who wasn't accustomed to the life of a Palestinian. And we came to a checkpoint in the northern West Bank, and he had a cross. He was the driver, and I was startled by it because the soldier grabbed his cross and started flipping it around. And then I quickly tried to film it, and they stopped. When I was in Bethlehem this year, I was visiting with women there, and one of them told the story of this. They went from Jericho for a day outing with their family. They crossed through the difficult road of Wadi Nar through the valley to get back to Bethlehem because they can't use the Israeli settler roads. They were stopped at a checkpoint. The soldier stopped them and said, "Give me your crosses. Give me the icons on your dashboard. Now give me a piece of tissue paper." And she proceeded to wrap up the icon and the crosses and throw them into the garbage. So there's been more, I think, because of that zealotry that has increased in Israel, direct attacks on Christians. Again, when I was there in September, I saw the enforced displacement, the cleansing into Al-Karam and Jenin. How many of us have known that 30,000 people have become refugees within the West Bank, are no longer allowed in their homes? And what made that most striking to me is that I am very close to the people in Zababti, which is about 8 kilometers from Jenin, and that the Jenin refugee camp is where the reporter Shireen al-Bakli had been killed. So every year when I go back, I always make it a point to go to the site where she was killed, because it's a site of memorial. At the tree where she was, you would always see posters, flowers put there. This year, less than 2 months ago when I went there, we couldn't get there, because the Israelis have forced out the population. We tried to drive as close as we could, and we were told by the locals, don't go there. During that past week, 2 young boys had been shot when they tried to go back to their refugee camp homes to retrieve some of their belongings. And they remarked about Taiba is a place very close to my heart, and I saw again where not only was it the burning of the cars and the graffiti asking for revenge by the Israelis against Palestinian villagers, but it was very clear that you could see the armed settlers there trying to control, stopping the Palestinians from going to their olive trees. So in the beginning I remarked, isn't it curious that lesser incidents can have more an effect on us than the horrific killings, acts of starvation we read about in Gaza? And for me, that incident was the announcement the other day that Israel is planning to confiscate 450 acres to establish an archaeological park in Sebastia, a Palestinian town with ancient Roman buildings, as well as an important Christian site where St. John the Baptist was held prisoner by Herod the Great. I've been there many times with pilgrim groups, know well the few Christian families there, have prayed at the site, and shared the dream of Father Justin, the Greek monk responsible for the nearby Jacob's Well in Nablus, as we made plans to restore the 6th century Church of St. John located at this site. With this latest blatant theft of Palestinian land by Israel, under the guise of protecting the land, more Palestinians, both Muslim and Christian, will be dispersed from their land, and Father Justin's hopes of building a church will fall by the wayside. It's just simply another way the Christian-Muslim presence are being disappeared from the Holy Land. I'm a nun, and it's acts such as these that resonate the most with me, that are the most painful. Not only the dispersion of the living stones, the native Palestinian Christians who have lived and prayed in the Holy Land for centuries, but the erasure of the Christian presence, the Christian legacy in a land where our Lord was born, preached his message of love one's enemies, wrought his miracles, was crucified and resurrected. At Ascension, as an Orthodox Christian, we read, "Who is this fair one from Edom? His garments dyed scarlet with the grapes of Basar. He is comely as God, and as immortal he hath reddened his robe with the blood of his flesh." Friends, what pains me now is how, with our inaction, we have continued to bloody our Lord. We have scarred the land of Christ with the tools of the occupation. Walls, tunnels, sniper towers lashed the land, all to separate one from his neighbor. A desperate attempt to pretend that those other people do not exist. So I come today not as the meek Christ, but as Christ before the money changers. We have had enough of supporting those who seek only to dominate like the settlers rather than live in peace with their neighbor. Enough of those who seek only to remain in power, even at their own expense, at the expense of their own people, such as Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I ask you, whether you observe a religion or no religion, I plead with you to end this raid. Why must another generation of Palestinian and Israeli children suffer? Do we really want two peoples living in peace? Then use your tools. Sanctions, economic boycott, international tribunals for those who have committed war crimes, on all sides. I say these words not only out of anger, but as a warning. A continuation of the status quo of talk and not action, of kicking the can down the road and just continuing to give aid and not provide a solution, will lead not only to more senseless deaths, trauma for Israelis and Palestinians, but will lead to the erasure of the Christian presence, the living stones, and legacy in the Holy Land. I don't want the churches of the Holy Land to become a museum under my watch. I cannot look at my Lord if I do not witness to this abomination. I appeal to all of those whose morality is based on the Abrahamic faith. Do the work that will honor that faith. Protect its places of sanctity, the Wailing, the Dome, and the Cupola, and honestly work towards a peaceful solution, and the occupation, and respect the human rights and dignity of all in the Holy Land. God bless you.
Thank you, Mother. By the way, our guests are celebrities. Many of our supporters and followers have asked, are they really coming? Yes, Mother Agapia, pastors are here. So now, as I said, like to keep the flow running, we'll have our last speaker, and then we will make a small announcement, and then we will have a break, and then we'll come back for the Q&A. So please welcome me, Pastor Montes.
Good evening, and I hope you still have energy. Your Excellencies and esteemed guests, Your Excellencies, it is really my honor to be with you here in Budapest, a very beautiful city of history, memory, and culture. We are grateful, of course, also for our hosts here in the Turkish Cultural Center. To speak about Palestine is not an easy endeavor. Many describe it as complicated with many nuances. That's how it's described. And I'm aware that our words touch sensitive political and historical realities, but we must speak honestly, because the situation in Palestine today is not a political question, it is a moral question. And that's the essence of my contribution today. And because it is a moral question, it should not be complicated when we talk about Palestine. Of course, we're here in Hungary, and it's not outside of the story, because while Hungary recognized the state of Palestine in 1988, recent positions opposing the one-sided recognition remind us that this is a question that is still deeply contested. And of course, Netanyahu's recent controversial visit to Budapest, Netanyahu has an arrest warrant by the ICC against him, underlines the polarizing times we live in. And of course, we are gathered here in a country with a long, rich Jewish presence, a nation that carries painful memories of anti-Semitism and genocide. And it's precisely because of these memories and because they matter, we must ensure that all forms of racism are confronted, including anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and today increasingly anti-Palestinian racism, which takes the form of dehumanizing Palestinians or denying that the genocide in Gaza even happened. So with this in mind, please allow me to offer some reflections that I hope can speak to people of faith and people of conscience alike why the Palestinian question is a moral question. To begin with, a genocide unfolded before the eyes of the world. In Gaza, a genocide unfolded not hidden in archives, but live in real time. We all watched it. We all saw the images. We all heard the voices. We all saw children starve. No one can claim we did not know. We all witnessed it. And when we talk about genocide, please remember, we Palestinians did not invent the word. We did not write the definition. The world did, and the West in particular, after the Holocaust, gave it moral and legal force through the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And then for years they lectured us about what genocide is and about racism, as if we were the problem. And now when we use the definition, the very definition, to describe what is unfolding before our eyes, we are told it is unacceptable. When Western allies commit the crime, the West rebukes those who name it. This is to me moral corruption. It's not only hypocrisy, it is racism. A denial of our equal humanity as Palestinians, as though human rights and moral outrage belong only to others, but never to Palestinians. So is it a genocide? Well, if you ask Francisca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, or Craig Mukheber, the director at the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or the UN Independent Commission of Inquiry, the International Court of Justice, several Israeli Jewish scholars like Omar Bertov, Ras Sigal, Neve Gordon, Ilan Pape, Jeff Halper, and others, numerous human rights organizations like B'Tselem, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Al-Haq, they all documented that it is a genocide. In October 2024, more than 800 scholars of genocide and international law, including leading academics from universities around the world, issued a joint statement warning that Israel's assault on Gaza bears the hallmark of a genocide. And then recently, in September 2025, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the world's leading body of genocide researchers, formally declared that Israel's actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide under 1948 Convention. And then we are attacked as Palestinians when we use the term. I hope you understand the moral corruption this is. Do we need more evidence? The real question is, why is it being denied? And of course, we're always asked about October 7th. Now, while we affirm that we oppose the killing and kidnapping of children and innocent civilians, we're against it, we condemn it, we wonder, what about Palestinian children and innocent ones, who for years were the victims of oppression in the form of displacement, mass killing, and abduction? October 7th has a context. It did not happen in isolation. And for decades, we have lived under a system of oppression documented by human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even the Israeli one, B'Tselem, special UN repertoires described as apartheid. In fact, when our South African friends visit us in Palestine, they tell us, we can smell apartheid from distance. What you have in Palestine is far worse than the apartheid we had in South Africa. All of this was ignored. We can talk about land confiscation, the denial of our basic rights, the administrative detention, even for children who are detained without charges. These facts, which are our daily reality, were ignored for years and silenced allowed the situation to deteriorate. See, no one wanted to see October 7th happen, but sadly, we saw it coming. We warned about it, but we were not heard. And the last 2 years have revealed a painful truth, something we Palestinians actually knew for years, but something that was on full display in a special way in the last 2 years, namely that there are two systems of morality in the world. One for the powerful and another for the colonized, the powerless. For one people, human rights and international law were invoked. For another, they were suspended. One violence is condemned, another is justified and excused even by faith leaders. You know, I mentioned the context, because every time we hear Israel has the right to defend itself. And I wonder, do we ever get the right as Palestinians to defend ourselves? Again, these are the double standards of the world. This double standard is not only a political problem, again, it is a moral crisis. I think we need to have a necessary word on anti-Semitism and its misuse. So let me speak clearly. Anti-Semitism is evil, and it must be confronted everywhere. The Jewish people suffered immeasurably in Europe, and that history must remain a moral guardrail for all of us. But precisely because anti-Semitism is so serious, we must also oppose its weaponization. In the past 2 years, and really for decades before that, but especially in the last 2 years, anyone speaking about Gaza, journalists, human rights defenders, church leaders, scholars, even genocide experts, they were all quickly labeled anti-Semitic. To do so is not a defense against hatred. To do so is an assault on truth. Criticizing a government is not anti-Semitism. Condemning apartheid is not anti-Semitism. And naming genocide is not anti-Semitism. Weaponizing the term harms not only Palestinian voices. It harms Jewish communities by trivializing a real danger. And believe me, many of our Jewish friends are telling us this. So our ethical duty is thus threefold: to oppose anti-Semitism, and to oppose the weaponization of the charge of anti-Semitism, and to oppose the dehumanization of Palestinians, racism against Palestinians. And for decades also, we've witnessed how religion and scripture were misused, and Reverend Mitri have touched on this. But especially during the genocide, the Bible was invoked by political leaders, the Zionists, and some Christian Zionists to justify violence and erasure against Palestinians. Zionism and Christian Zionism are ideologies that use religious language to control the discourse and even alter realities. Colonialism was framed as Jewish return to the land. Palestinians were framed as strangers, and as such, a Jew from Brooklyn or Budapest moving to Palestine, displacing Palestinians and denying us our rights, was framed as Jews returning to the land. The occupation and apartheid were framed as a religious conflict between the Judeo-Christian tradition and Islam. And we are here as Christians to declare unequivocally that this is not simply bad theology, it is a distortion that undermines any faith tradition claiming to uphold dignity, justice, and compassion. The Bible is not about a tribal, racist God of war and violence. And it's not about ethnic cleansing. The Bible is about a loving God of grace who was revealed in Jesus, the embodiment of truth, justice, and compassion. So herein lies the tragedy. Religion became part of the problem, and ethics and morality were set aside. Throughout the last 2 years, we've seen how power replaced ethics, and people of faith did not raise their voices. And as a result, today we live in a world in which might makes right. We live in a world in which economic interests trump human rights. Regional politics override justice. And even war crimes are excused and accountability is absent. This is the logic of empires, not the logic of a just world. This is not justice. And without justice, there can never be peace. That's why people of faith and human of conscience must rise and speak up against this, because never again has become yet again. What we witnessed in Gaza is not only a Palestinian tragedy. I strongly believe it is a warning to the world. If genocide can be justified once, it can be justified again. If one people can be dehumanized, others will follow. And if international law and human rights are rendered irrelevant in one context, then they are irrelevant everywhere. This should concern all of us. This should concern Hungary, this should concern Europe, the Middle East, all of us. Because the erosion of moral principles anywhere weakens them everywhere. And sadly, never again has become yet again. So what is our moral responsibility? And I'll close with this. For us as not just people of faith, but people of conscience. And here I want to speak not only as a pastor or theologian, but also as a human being. Our responsibility, we must speak because silence is complicity. Whether in churches, mosques, synagogues, parliaments, civil society, or public life, silence in the face of clear oppression is not a neutrality, but complicity, even an endorsement. And we must insist on human dignity as non-negotiable. Every life matters. Israelis' lives matters, Palestinian life matters, all life matters. But when we acknowledge equal worth, this also requires naming unequal suffering and naming oppression. We must reject all forms of racism, whether anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and today, as I mentioned, anti-Palestinian racism, all of them must be acknowledged. The refusal to acknowledge Palestinian humanity must be exposed and resisted. And we must defend international law consistently, even though it has its flaws. But if human rights, as I said, are universal, they cannot be suspended for geopolitical convenience. And we must take a stand for justice. Taking a stand does not mean being anti-anyone, but it means being pro-human, pro-dignity, pro-equality, and pro-life. And for those who come from faith traditions, we must remember that at the heart of faith is how we defend the oppressed and the weak and the marginalized. This is at the core of our faith. This is what we call solidarity. And I come from Bethlehem. The story of Christmas reminds us that God chose to be found among the vulnerable, among the occupied. He was born among the occupied. He survived a massacre as a child and then became a refugee to send the message about divine solidarity with us. To me, this is the meaning of Christmas. And even those without religious identity This is a moral principle that I believe is universal, not just for us as people of faith, that justice requires standing with those who suffer, not with those who cause suffering. This must be our call. So friends, Palestine has become a moral compass, a test of our shared humanity. History will ask, did we raise our voices when Gaza was burning? Did we insist on justice and accountability? Did we stand with those whose lives were deemed expendable? My hope is that in this country and other places, but Hungary with its rich cultures, its historical conscience, its diverse communities, will play a role in defending a global moral order grounded in justice, equality, and human dignity for all. And my hope is that all of us, people of faith and people of conscience, will have the courage to do what this moment requires. To speak clearly, to act justly, and to stand where humanity is calling us to stand, on the side of the oppressed, on the side of dignity, on the side of freedom, and on the side of life. Thank you.
Actually, how painful it is to hear the word, where were you when Gaza was burning? This word is really painful. Anyway, I believe no words can add to what we have heard. Before we go to the break, I would like to give two announcements. After difficult negotiations with Pastor Andrássy, we were able to secure a number of passes. So I'm pleased to offer 20 passes to our distinguished guests who wish to attend the premiere of Via della Rosa tomorrow, the first time to be shown here in Budapest. Those who are interested can consult one of our colleagues to get their free passes. The second reminder would be after 3 days, on the 29th of November, we will be having the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. To commemorate, a service will be held at the homecoming church, Haz-Terash Church, on Sunday at 10 a.m. So you are all warmly welcome. Dear friends, it is hard time. It's difficult moments we're living. But history has shown us that nations have endured. Nations have prevailed. And like you, like all of those nations here, we will not stop until Bethlehem is free, until Jerusalem is free, and until Palestine is free. المجد والخلود للشهداء. عشتم وعاشت فلسطين. God bless you and God bless Palestine. Now we have a break and then we will have Q&A session, please.
Why not do my phone?
How are you?